By tradition, Rome was founded in 753 BC. The Romans controlled a substantial empire by the middle of the 3rd century BC, and from Augustus, who assumed his imperial title in 27 BC, to Constantine XI, who died on the walls of Constantinople in 1453, at least part of the Mediterranean world was ruled by Roman emperors. Such longevity, it hardly needs saying, is remarkable. By way of contrast, the average nation in the 19th and 20th centuries only lasted 32 years. Some modern nations, of course, have been around for centuries, and a handful of historical states, such as the dynasties of Imperial China or ancient Egypt, have very long histories. No empire, however, survived as long as Rome. Of the many factors that contributed to Rome's durability, the most fundamental was geography. The Romans controlled the entire coastline of the Mediterranean Sea for half a millennium. Virtually all of the greatest Roman cities were located on or near its shores, and in the warm months, tens of thousands of ships, from tiny fishing vessels to gargantuan grain barges, sailed along its coasts. The corrugated coastlines of the Mediterranean contain countless natural harbors. In combination with predictable trade winds and a lack of tides, this made the Mediterranean relatively easy to navigate. Since waterborne trade was far faster and cheaper than its overland equivalent in the pre-industrial era, the Mediterranean was the ancient equivalent of a superhighway, circulating goods and people with remarkable efficiency. Speaking of remarkable efficiency, I'd like to talk about our sponsor, the web browser Opera. When I started using Opera, I was especially impressed by Aria, a generative AI designed to help users browse more intuitively. If, for example, I ask when the Roman Empire fell, Aria quickly produces a curated answer. I can highlight any term, for example, Romulus Augustulus, and use this tooltip to explain, explore, or translate it. I'm also a fan of Opera's tab islands. This feature allows you to organize tabs, like these reference pages, by topic. You can easily collapse islands you're not using and expand them as needed. Opera also includes a built-in VPN and ad blocker, no need for third-party programs or extensions, in addition to a video pop-out feature that you can use to rewatch your favorite Told & Stone videos while browsing lesser content. To find out for yourself how Opera can help you explore the web more efficiently and intuitively, click the link in the description and download the Opera desktop for free today. Let's return to our discussion of how the Mediterranean helped to sustain the Roman Empire. Although most trade was local, the Mediterranean was a unified economic zone. A single ancient dump in Rome is estimated to contain more than 50 million amphorae, originally filled with olive oil from Spain and North Africa. Likewise, a fish sauce supplier based in Pompeii imported his product from as far away as Spain and exported it across Italy and into southern France. The existence of the empire eased communications, but the empire was ultimately held together by political and cultural institutions. Particularly important were Rome's strategies for gaining the allegiance of provincials. Under the early emperors, Roman citizenship was offered to favored leaders in cities. Provincial elites were given the right and responsibility of collecting taxes and given opportunities for unprecedented wealth and prestige in the imperial system. Within a century of Caesar's conquest of Gaul, great-grandsons of the chieftains he defeated were members of the Roman Senate. Beyond a Mediterranean-centric territory and governing strategies that involved local elites in the project of empire, the Roman state owed its longevity to a number of extremely durable characteristics. Preeminent among these was the position of the emperor. The imperial system created by Augustus had significant weaknesses. Its pseudo-republicanism, for example, prevented the establishment of a clear law of succession. It was, however, far more stable than the anarchic late republic. It satisfied the ambitions of the old aristocracy by employing them as officials. It ensured a basic standard of responsible management in the provinces. Roman emperors worked hard, responding to a never-ending stream of petitions and petitioners, but to most of their subjects, they were nothing more or less than symbols. tens of millions of Romans who never saw the emperor knew him from coins, statues, and inscriptions. Millions more revered him through the rituals of the imperial cult. Later, in the Byzantine era, being Roman came to be almost synonymous with being an Orthodox Christian and a loyal subject of the devout emperor. Although the early emperors took some pains to conceal the fact, the Roman Empire was always a military autocracy. The professional army that Augustus created was an anomaly in the pre-modern world, where militias and conscript armies were the rule. It was also a gargantuan financial burden, consuming more than half the imperial budget, even in times of peace. The investment, however, paid handsome dividends. Besides warding off external threats and keeping order in the provinces, a standing army provided the emperors with an irresistible source of support. The soldiers knew who paid them and tended to remain loyal to the bottom line. Less tangible, and perhaps as much a consequence as a cause of the empire's longevity, was the persistence of a remarkably uniform elite culture. Within the two dominant cultural spheres of the empire, Latin in the west, Greek in the east, and with a considerable degree of bilingual overlap, the sons of wealthy families went to the same kinds of schools, read the same authors, and learned to value the same public virtues. As a result, the most influential provincials tended to have similar values and similar expectations about government. As a class, they were fundamentally conservative and tended to identify themselves with the justice and sense of order theoretically epitomized by the emperor. Institutions can only take us so far. The Romans themselves were aware that the reach and durability of their empire were partly a matter of luck, some believed divine favor. The Romans were especially fortunate at certain critical periods. During the 2nd and 1st centuries BC, for example, the general disintegration of the Hellenistic world eased the conquest of the eastern Mediterranean. The fact that Augustus lived so long and enjoyed a reign of more than 40 years underpinned the establishment of the imperial system. The hard winter of 718 AD saved Constantinople and gave the Byzantine Empire another 7 centuries of life. There is no single or simple answer for why the Roman Empire lasted so long. In the end, the very fact of its longevity helped to sustain it. In the minds of subjects and enemies alike, it had too much historical inertia to fall. In a sense, it never has. My new book, Insane Emperors, Sunken Cities, and Earthquake Machines, is now available as a paperback, ebook, and audiobook. You can buy your copy through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or your local bookstore. For more Told & Stone content, check out my channels, Told & Stone Footnotes, and Scenic Routes to the Past, which are linked in the description. Please consider joining other viewers in supporting Told & Stone on Patreon. Thanks for watching.